My name is Paige Mitchell. I'm 29 years old, and 2 months ago, my mom looked me straight in the eye and decided my body was a family problem to fix. It started at what was supposed to be a simple family dinner to talk about my little sister's wedding. The table was covered in roast chicken, mashed potatoes, bread rolls, all the usual comfort food my mom loves to brag about. Halfway through the meal, she set her fork down, stared at my plate, then at my stomach, and said, "You know you're not coming to your sister's wedding unless you lose weight, right?" I thought I'd misheard her, but she kept going. She gave this little sneer and added, "Look at you. How embarrassing would this body be in all her wedding photos?" My dad didn't even flinch. He just nodded and said, "We can't have people thinking we don't take care of ourselves. What will the guests think of our family?" I felt my face burn, my throat sting, but I didn't cry, and I didn't argue. I just cut another piece of chicken, chewed slowly, and finished my meal while my parents planned a wedding I was apparently too big to attend. They thought they'd boxed me into a choice: shrink myself to fit their image, or stay home and disappear from my own sister's life. 2 months later, the night before the wedding, I walked into the resort anyway. And when my parents saw me, I watched their faces change in real time, from smug judgment to stunned shock, to something I'd never seen on them before: fear. They wanted to control me with an ultimatum. Stay with me until the end, and I'll show you how I turned that ultimatum into the one thing that ruined their perfect little wedding fantasy. That look on their faces at the resort didn't come out of nowhere. It was the result of a lifetime they spent training me to believe my body was their biggest embarrassment. I grew up in a dusty little town a couple of hours from Sedona, Arizona, the kind of place where everyone knows your business, and the high school football schedule is basically a religion. From kindergarten on, I was the big kid. I was always a size or two larger than the other girls, slower in PE, the one who dreaded any activity that involved running in front of people. The kids at school made sure I never forgot it. They called me Pudge Paige, grabbed at my lunch, asked if I really needed seconds. I learned early how to laugh it off so they wouldn't see they'd hit their mark. At home, instead of being the safe place, it just felt like another arena where I was on display. My mom, Diane, loved having people over for barbecues and game nights, and she loved looking like the perfect hostess with the perfect family. She'd squeeze into her jeans, fix her hair, and then turn to me with a sigh. "You'd be so pretty if you just slimmed down a little, Paige," she'd say, as if she was giving me some loving advice. My dad, Greg, wasn't cruel with his words, but his silence hurt just as much. Every time I stepped on a scale at the doctor's office and the nurse read out the number, I could feel his disappointment in the way he wouldn't meet my eyes. Then there was my little sister, Sydney. 2 years younger, naturally slim, naturally bubbly, the girl who made friends at the grocery store checkout line. When we were little, we were close. We shared a room, whispered under the covers, played dress-up together. But by middle school, everyone loved to point out how different we looked. "You two are sisters? How did that happen?" people would joke. Mom would laugh and say, "Sydney got my metabolism, poor Paige got my appetite." Around 8th grade, Sydney realized she could gain social points by leaning into the joke. At school, she would walk a few steps ahead of me so no one would think we were together. If someone made a comment about my size, she'd give this little smirk, like she didn't want to rock the boat by defending me. At home, she'd eat junk food in front of me and say things like, "I don't know why you gain so easily, it's not that hard to stay fit," while Mom nodded like it was just common sense. Whenever I tried to tell Diane and Greg that the teasing at school and the comments at home were getting to me, they brushed it off as normal sibling stuff. "You're too sensitive," they'd say. "If you just lost a little weight, they wouldn't have anything to tease you about." So I did the only thing I could control. I buried myself in schoolwork. Straight A's became my armor. Every time teachers praised me or I got an honor roll certificate, my parents finally looked proud. But even in those moments, Diane would find a way to lace it with a condition. Imagine how unstoppable you'd be if you dropped 20 pounds. That was the story of my life with them. Any achievement I had came with a reminder that my body was still a problem. So when my mom told me I wasn't welcome at my own sister's wedding unless I changed, it didn't feel like a one-time insult. It felt like the final, official stamp on a message they'd been sending me since I was a kid. You are never enough as you are. Leaving that dinner, I drove back to my hotel in a kind of numb autopilot, replaying my mom's voice in my head like a bad song on repeat. By the time I got on the early flight back to San Diego the next morning, the ultimatum had twisted into something uglier. It wasn't just lose weight or stay home. It was change yourself to fit our picture or disappear. I stared out the plane window watching the desert fade into clouds and realized how many times I'd already disappeared for them, shrinking my personality, my opinions, even my presence in photos so Sydney could shine and Diane could have her perfect family image. Somewhere between Phoenix and the Pacific, I decided I was done disappearing. At first, my brain went straight to petty revenge. I imagined showing up to the wedding exactly the same, just to spite them, or refusing to go at all and sending a one-line text. Per your request, I'll stay home. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized that whatever I did next was going to define the rest of my life, not just one weekend. I didn't want my story to be the daughter who stayed fat and bitter, or the daughter who starved herself to earn a seat at the table. I wanted it to be the daughter who stopped letting them write her story. So I made a different choice. I pulled up the Notes app on my phone and wrote one sentence. I am going to change my body for me, not for them. When I landed in San Diego, I went straight home, threw out the junk I kept for stress nights, and actually used the gym membership I'd been half paying for. I booked sessions with a trainer at my apartment complex, told him I had 2 months, and that I wasn't chasing a magic number, just strength and confidence. We focused on what was realistic: lifting, walking, cleaning up my eating so I didn't feel like I was punishing myself. At the same time, I finally invested in the little things I used to write off as for thinner girls. I got a real haircut, not a rushed trim from the cheapest place I could find. I booked a makeup lesson at a Sephora counter and took notes. I ordered a few outfits that actually fit my current body instead of the fantasy size I kept buying for someday. The funny thing was, the more I treated myself like someone worth effort, the easier it became to stick to the routine. I started sleeping better. I had more energy at work. When my manager offered me a lead role on a new project, I said yes without hesitating and didn't immediately picture myself as the frumpy girl in the meeting. Through it all, I kept one rule with my family: no video calls, no full-body photos in the group chat, no updates about my weight. When Diane texted, "How's the diet going?" I replied, "I'm taking care of myself," and left it at that. They assumed I was either failing or suffering to meet their terms. What they didn't know was that every day I was building something they couldn't control. A version of me who might still walk into that wedding weekend, but on her own terms, not theirs. 2 months slid by faster than I expected. Between early morning workouts, late nights on my project, and learning how to actually enjoy taking care of myself, the wedding almost became background noise. Then my boarding pass to Phoenix popped up in my email, and reality snapped back into focus. On the flight to Arizona, I caught my reflection in the tiny airplane bathroom mirror and almost did a double take. I was still me, still soft in places, still recognizable, but my face looked sharper, my posture straighter. My clothes fit on purpose instead of by accident. For the first time in a long time, I didn't dread being seen. The resort near Sedona looked like something off Instagram, all warm stone and string lights against the red rock. I rolled my suitcase through the lobby, my heart pounding harder than any workout I'd done in the last 8 weeks. I was wearing a simple fitted black dress that hit just above my knees, with sleeves that made my arms feel strong instead of exposed. My hair was smooth, my makeup subtle, but intentional. I didn't feel like a different person. I just felt like the version of myself I'd been waiting to meet. I found the private dining room where the families were having a welcome dinner before the rehearsal. I heard Sydney's laugh before I saw her, bright and familiar, the soundtrack of every party I'd ever been a shadow in. I took a breath, squared my shoulders, and walked in. At first, nobody registered me. They were mid-story, mid-laughter, mid-wine sip. Then my mom looked up. For a second, her face was stuck in that default expression she always wore around me, the tight little frown that said she was bracing for disappointment. Then her eyes actually focused, tracked from my face down to the dress that hugged a waist she hadn't seen on me in years, and her jaw loosened. "Paige?" she said, like I was a stranger who'd walked into the wrong room. My dad's head snapped over. He blinked a few times, like his brain needed a second to load the new image. "Wow," he said finally, because of course that was the first thing that mattered. You look different." Sydney turned next. For half a heartbeat, she looked genuinely happy to see me. Then she saw the way a couple of Brandon's relatives were glancing between us, and something mean flickered behind her eyes. "Oh my God, Paige," she said, standing up to hug me, the scent of her expensive perfume wrapping around us. "You look great. You should have told us you were doing, like, a full makeover." I pulled back from the hug and smiled, keeping my voice light. "I figured you had enough to worry about with the wedding. Besides, you told me to lose weight or stay home. I chose option 3. Mom laughed a little too loudly, the sound brittle. "Well, you certainly took our advice seriously," she said. "See, Greg? Tough love works." Dad nodded, but there was something unsettled in his eyes, like he wasn't sure if he was proud or nervous. As I took my seat, I could feel their gazes on me, weighing and measuring, trying to decide if this new version of me still fit into the box they'd built. Every time one of Brandon's cousins or his mother glanced over with a polite, impressed smile, I saw Sydney's jaw tighten just a bit more. Under the table, my hands were steady. They thought they were seeing the payoff of their ultimatum. They had no idea I hadn't come back just to decorate their family photos. I'd come back to stop letting them use me as a prop in their perfect story. And whether they liked it or not, I was done playing the role they wrote for me. If the welcome dinner was awkward, the rehearsal the next night turned it into a pressure cooker. By then, everyone had gotten over the initial shock of new Paige, at least on the surface. I could tell my parents had decided on a story. I was their little project, proof that their tough love worked. Every time someone complimented me, my mom chimed in with, "We've been on her about her health for years," like my body was some home renovation she'd finally finished. We shuffled through the ceremony practice at the outdoor pavilion, the red rocks glowing behind us as the officiant walked everyone through the order. Sydney checked her reflection in every window we passed, snapping at the bridesmaids about bouquet angles and timing. I stayed in the background, following directions, smiling when I was supposed to, pretending not to notice the way a few people kept glancing between us like they were recalculating who was the pretty sister now. After the rehearsal, we went back inside for drinks and dessert. That was when the comments started up again, quieter this time, more controlled, the way mean people talk when they're afraid someone else might be listening. Mom leaned over while we were waiting in line for cheesecake and murmured, "I'm glad you took things seriously, but tomorrow is about Sydney. Don't wear anything too bright, okay? Something simple so you don't distract from her." Dad added, "Yeah, just blend in. You've already made your point." Across the table later, Sydney smiled with all her teeth and said, "It's actually perfect, Paige. You finally lost weight, you'll look good in pictures, and you can kind of fade into the background like always. Best of both worlds. She tried to make it sound like a joke, but the message was clear. You're allowed here now, as long as you don't take up any real space. I felt the familiar burn in my chest, the urge to swallow it down and let the night pass. Instead, I set my glass down and asked, in a voice just loud enough for the table to hear, "Do you ever get tired of pretending this is what support looks like?" Conversations around us dipped. A few forks paused midair. My mom's smile froze. "Paige, this isn't the time," she hissed through her teeth. "We're celebrating your sister." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm curious. Do her future in-laws know you told me I wasn't welcome at her wedding unless I lost weight?" For a second, the only sound was a spoon clinking against a coffee cup somewhere down the table. Brandon's mom looked from me to Diane, eyebrows knitting. "What is she talking about?" she asked. My dad let out this short, nervous laugh. "She's exaggerating. We just encouraged her to get healthier, that's all. You know how kids twist things." I took out my phone, my hands as steady as if I were about to present in a meeting. "Funny," I said softly, "because my memory is pretty clear." I tapped the screen, scrolled to the audio file I'd labeled the night of that dinner, and hit play. Our table filled with the unmistakable sound of my mother's voice from 2 months ago, crackling a little, but still sharp. "You are not coming to your sister's wedding unless you lose weight, Paige. I'm not having those pictures. I'm not letting you embarrass this family." Then my father's voice, solid and calm. "What will people think of us if our own daughter can't take care of herself? If you don't change, you stay home." The recording ended, leaving a silence that felt heavier than the desert heat outside. Diane's face drained of color, then flushed a deep, blotchy red. "You recorded us?" she whispered, like that was the worst part. "You're making us sound like monsters." "I didn't make you sound like anything," I said. "You did that on your own. I just stopped letting you rewrite the script." Brandon's mother stared at them, horrified. "You told your daughter she wasn't allowed at the wedding because of her weight?" she asked slowly. "And you're proud of that?" Sydney shot up from her chair, eyes shining with angry tears. "You're ruining everything," she snapped at me. "This is my weekend, Paige. Why do you always have to make it about you?" I stayed seated, my voice low and even. "You made it about my body the second you turned your wedding into a punishment for existing in it," I said. "You wanted me smaller and quieter. Congratulations. I got smaller. I stopped getting quieter." Around us, the room felt like it was tilting. My parents weren't just shocked anymore. They were scared. Scared of how they looked. Scared of losing control. Scared that for once, people were hearing my side instead of their polished version of events. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about that at all. Word traveled fast after that recording. By the time I woke up the next morning, my phone was already buzzing with texts from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Half of them were some version of "I had no idea" and "good for you." The other half were politely asking if it was really true. I ignored them all, threw on leggings and a t-shirt, and went for a walk along the resort paths while the sun was still low. The desert air was cool, but my stomach was tight with the knowledge that today was supposed to be the big day. By mid-morning, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Sydney was standing there in a satin robe, her hair half done, eyes rimmed with red. Behind her, down the hall, I could see bridesmaids hovering, pretending not to stare. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the room. "Mom is freaking out. Brandon's parents are furious. You have to fix this." I leaned against the dresser, crossing my arms. "Fix what exactly? The part where I played back your own words? Or the part where your future in-laws realized what family values means to you?" Her voice cracked. You're blowing one conversation out of proportion. Everyone says stuff they don't mean. Now Brandon's mom is asking if we should postpone, and my wedding might not even happen today. Are you happy? The old version of me would have rushed to reassure her, taken the blame just to keep the peace. The new version took a breath and answered the question honestly. No, I'm not happy your wedding might be ruined, I said. I'm sad it took you almost losing a husband for you to see how ugly this all is. But I'm not sorry. Before she could respond, there was another knock. This time, it was Brandon, still in his t-shirt and jeans, no tucks in sight. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. Can I come in? He asked. Sydney hesitated, then nodded. He shut the door behind him and looked between us. I listened to that recording again this morning, he said quietly, and I thought about all the comments I've heard over the last year, the little digs about Paige's weight, the way your mom talks about appearances. He turned to Sydney. Is that how it's always been? She started to deny it, then wilted under his gaze. It's not that bad, she muttered. They just care about how our family looks. That's normal. Brandon shook his head. No, it's not, he said. My mom keeps asking me if this is the environment our kids will grow up in. If our daughter put on weight one day, would your parents tell her she's not welcome at family events? Would you? The room went very still. Sydney opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered, I don't know. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. I love you, he said. But I can't stand in front of everyone today and promise forever while pretending this isn't a problem. Not with your parents refusing to apologize and you acting like Paige is the villain for refusing to be humiliated in silence. Sydney's eyes filled again. So what are you saying? He looked broken in a way that made it clear this wasn't easy for him. I'm saying we need to hit pause, he replied. Postpone the wedding. Go to counseling. Talk about boundaries with your parents. Figure out if we can build a life that doesn't look like this. Sydney turned on me like an injured animal. You did this, she snapped. You couldn't just let it go for one day? I met her glare evenly. You did this the night you sat there and let them tell me I wasn't welcome unless I changed my body, I said. All I did was stop protecting you from the consequences. A few hours later, I watched from my balcony as staff quietly took down chairs from the ceremony site, bundles of white flowers carried away in the arms of exhausted planners. Guests milled around awkwardly, getting the wedding postponed story in hushed, confused explanations. Somewhere down there, my parents were spinning a new version of events, one where I was the selfish daughter who ruined everything. For once, I didn't feel any urge to rush in and defend myself. I closed the balcony door, picked up my suitcase, and checked out of the resort. If there wasn't going to be a wedding today, I wasn't going to hang around for the blame game. I pointed my rental car toward a spa hotel a couple of towns over, turned my phone on Do Not Disturb, and decided that if everyone else's plans had fallen apart, I was at least going to keep mine. Spending the day with the only person whose approval I actually needed, my own. I wish I could say everything magically healed after that day, but real life doesn't work like a movie. There was no big tearful group hug, no perfect apology monologue. What happened instead was quieter, messier, and in some ways, a lot more honest. For the first couple of weeks, my phone lit up constantly. My mom left long voicemails, half sobbing, half furious, about how I had torn the family apart and humiliated her. My dad sent shorter messages, mostly variations of "call your mother" and "we need to talk about how you handled things." Sydney's texts swung between rage and desperation. One minute I was a monster who ruined her life. The next, I was the only person who understood how controlling our parents could be. I didn't respond right away. I went back to San Diego, slid into my routines, and added one more new habit to my life: Therapy. My therapist didn't flinch when I laid it all out. The ultimatum, the years of comments, the recording, the canceled wedding. She looked at me and said, "You were the only one in that situation who chose truth over image. That's not cruelty, Paige. That's courage." It took a while for my brain to believe her, but it was a start. A few months later, the family gossip started to reach me in pieces. An aunt DM'd me on Instagram to say she was proud of me. A cousin told me that after the wedding was postponed, Brandon drew a hard line. He wouldn't set a new date until Sydney and her parents agreed to real boundaries. Diane hated that word. Boundaries meant she wasn't in control. Apparently, there were screaming matches, tears, tense family dinners where everyone pretended things were normal until they exploded again. At one point, Sydney moved out for a few weeks just to get some breathing room. My parents tried to rewrite the story everywhere they went. In their version, I was the ungrateful daughter who weaponized an innocent comment to sabotage her sister's big day. But the problem with lying in a small community is that people talk. And enough guests had heard that recording or seen the way they treated me to know the truth. Invitations to barbecues dried up. Friends stopped asking my mom for diet tips and started giving her looks when she opened her mouth about someone's appearance. The image she cared so much about cracked, and for once, I wasn't the one standing in front of it to shield her. One day, my dad finally sent a different kind of message. It was longer than usual. He admitted he hadn't realized how bad it had gotten, that he'd gone along with my mom's obsession with appearances because it was easier than fighting her. He said he was sorry if I made you feel less than, which wasn't the clean, perfect apology I deserved, but it was the closest he'd ever come to owning his part. I stared at that text for a long time. Then I replied, "I didn't feel less than, Dad. You and Mom treated me like I was. That's the difference. I'm working on forgiving you. But I won't come back to a dynamic where my body is up for debate." He didn't argue, he just wrote, "I understand." And for the first time in my life, I think he actually did. As for Sydney, months passed before I heard from her directly again. When she finally called, her voice sounded smaller, tired. She told me she and Brandon were in couples counseling, that he still wanted to marry her, but only if she agreed that their future kids would never be talked to the way I was. She confessed she'd grown up watching my mom treat me like a problem to fix and had copied it without stopping to think what it felt like. "I was so scared of being the one she turned on that I just kept letting her do it to you," she said quietly. "I'm not asking you to forget what I did. I'm just trying not to be that person anymore." I didn't rush to reassure her. I told her I was glad she was seeing it clearly, that she owed me a real apology for every time she joined in instead of standing beside me. She gave it. No excuses, no jokes, just a raw, "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Forgiving her didn't mean forgetting everything overnight, but I let some of the bitterness go. Not for her, really, for me. These days, my life is not defined by a canceled wedding or a number on a scale. It's early morning walks by the ocean, late night laughs with friends who never comment on what's on my plate, projects at work that challenge me in ways that have nothing to do with how I look. My body still changes. Some weeks I'm more toned. Some weeks I'm softer. But it's mine. It's not a PR campaign for anyone else. If there's any lesson in all of this, it's that family expectations can feel like laws when you're growing up, but they're not. You don't owe anyone the right to shame you, even if they raised you, even if they pay for dinners, even if they're hosting a wedding and waving an invitation over your head like a prize. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to say, "I will not shrink myself to make you more comfortable," and mean it. My mom's ultimatum was supposed to make me smaller and quieter. Instead, it blew up the illusion that our family was fine and forced everyone to see what I'd been living with for years. It cost them their perfect wedding, their spotless reputation, their easy narrative. It cost me a fantasy too, the one where they would suddenly wake up and become the parents I always wanted. But it gave me something better, the chance to stop chasing their approval and start choosing myself. So that's what I did. That's what I'm still doing. And if you've ever felt like you had to earn your place in your own family by changing your body, your personality, your entire self, maybe it's time to ask whose story you're really living and what might happen if you finally start writing your own. Our team at Revenge Argon is dedicated to creating meaningful, well-crafted stories that explore complex family emotions and personal growth. We promise that this is a purely fictional story, designed only to deliver valuable lessons and positive educational messages to our viewers. This script highlights the importance of self-respect, healthy boundaries, and recognizing emotional abuse, even when it comes from family. It encourages viewers to reflect on how words and attitudes can shape a person's confidence and mental health. Through this family drama, the story offers educational value by showing that true love means accepting others without conditions and learning to stand up for your own dignity.